When I searched online, I found a great deal of interesting facts and information about the Philippine Church, celebrating its 500 years of Christianity. Yes, other than online searches, one can learn more about the vibrant Philippine Church and its faith journey. I'm JD Maher. Welcome to Shalom World's 500 YOC program in partnership with the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines. In this series, we dive deep into 500 years of Christianity, its roots, its culture, fruits, and faith journey in the world's third largest Catholic country, the Philippines.
Philippines, the third largest Catholic country after Brazil and Mexico. More than 90% of Filipinos are Christians. 80.6% are Catholics. The country is a cluster of more than 7,600 islands, a hospitable people with versatile culture and tradition. In the 16th century, explorer Ferdinand Magellan and his team of voyagers from Europe reached the island of Cebu to expand their spice trade. This has been marked as a milestone in the history of the country and its people. The Christian missionaries who accompanied Magellan on the Spanish ship spread the gospel in the Philippines.
We have with us Most Reverend Marcelino Antonio Malabanan Maralit.
Bishop Marcelino Antonio Maralit Jr., fondly called Bishop Juni, was appointed Bishop of the Roman Diocese of Boac on December 31, 2014, and was installed on March 17, 2015. A graduate of philosophy from St. Francis de Sales Major Seminary, he studied sacred theology from the Universidad de Navarra in Pamplona, Spain. He obtained his licentiate and doctorate degrees in ecclesiastical history from the Pontificia Università Santa Croce in Rome, Italy. He played roles for many years at the St. Francis de Sales Theological Seminary in Lipa as a priest, professor, formator, dean of studies, vice rector, and rector.
We also want to welcome Dr. Jose Mario Bautista Maximiano.
Dr. Jose Mario Bautista Maximiano is the author of the books 500 Years Roman Catholic Volume 1 and 500 Taong Cristiano Volume 2, which narrates the Philippine Church history in partnership with the CBCP in line with the celebration of the 500 years of Christianity in the country. He is also a regular columnist of the Inquirer newspaper and a social media influencer. Dr. Maximiano completed all his postgraduate studies with Latin honors. He earned his doctorate from the Universidad de Navarra, his MBA from the Graduate School of Business Ateneo de Manila University, his MA in Religious Studies from the Graduate School of University of Santo Tomas, Manila, and his licentiate in Theology, magna cum laude, from the Faculty of Sacred Theology, University of Santo Tomas.
Today, we will continue the journey with Bishop Juni Maralit and Dr. Jose Mario Maximiano to discuss more about the history and the seeds of the faith of the Philippine Church.
The sacramental presence of God became alive in our land for the first time.
The salient events in the history of the Church in the Philippines, the story of the first Holy Mass, the first Easter celebration, first evangelization efforts.
First presence of the Holy Eucharist in the Philippine Islands was by itself divine. That first presence was by itself already the start of conversion.
Well, it's time to explore the story behind the ingrained Catholic seeds of faith in the Pearl of the Orient Seas. I'm sure you're all eagerly awaiting this discussion. Bishop Maralit, Dr. Jose Maximiano, welcome back to the show, 500 YOC, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Good day, JD.
Same here. Thank you very much, JD, and to Shalom World.
Excellent. We're going to transition now to the time, very turbulent time once again, which had catastrophic results. We're going to move into the time of World War II. We're going to fast forward to the 1940s right now. I've got several points I want to cover, so I'll start back with Dr. Maximiano. And what comes to mind, first of all, at the start of the entrance of World War II with the Philippine people?
Yeah, JD, it was really a very, very sad event. From Hawaii, the Japanese invaders came, and it was Immaculate Conception. It was Mary's feast day. And they have destroyed so many things, airfields of the Americans, just to make sure that the Americans cannot cope fighting against or defending the Filipinos. What is important here also is, after the invasion, General Eisenhower was saying, this is the worst destruction I have ever seen in the world, second only to Warsaw, Poland. Because Manila then was so devastated. Imagine something like 9/11 in New York, that's in one area, and multiply it in the whole entire city, something like that. It was the worst destruction ever. I would like to pinpoint what happened in terms of the priests taking care of, defending the Filipinos and even foreigners. And they have to really become the voice of the voiceless, for which the Japanese hated them. I have here from Edward Russell's Knights of Bushido. And this was gathered from several diaries of the Japanese soldiers who were conquered. And he was saying that carnage in several parts of Manila and other cities was just, the whole city just turned red because of blood, because of destruction, because of bombings, because of being bayoneted. There was this comfort women in the Philippines, rapes of young girls in convents, so much destruction of mind, heart, and soul, and body. And the priest will have to stand and defend them. This is when the CBCP was born, Bishop Junie. This is when the CBCP was born from the ashes, from the debris of war. And these bishops were gathering together with one priest, a Jesuit priest who had strong connections in the United States. They gathered together. And they were gathered together first in that internment camp in Achiwa State. And then they planned. And then they mobilized resources. And then they called their friends. And then they were telling people, look, we are here for you.
And Bishop Junie, add on to that. Let's talk about the role of the church during this turbulent time of World War II. Tell us about the church's role to help alleviate the pain and suffering of the people in the Philippines.
The Filipinos are very spiritual. They're very close to their church. In spite of the historical nuances that we have just seen, the revolution, then the Aglipayan church, still they remain very, very Catholic. They remain very religious. That's why, even in spite of the experience of the Second World War, it's a great consolation for people still during this time to speak to priests, to hear them say Mass, because Masses still continued. It may not be in the churches, but there were Masses being celebrated just like the old, ancient, primitive churches. They were being celebrated in houses. Masses were also being celebrated in spite of the reality of the war. Masses were being celebrated in certain areas. The sacraments were still being given. Of course, it was less during that time, but still it was being given. Then, not only that, the consolation given by the priests to the people were not only spiritual, it was also material, because just like what Dr. Maximiano said, there are stories of priests organizing other people to help out the other persons who might have been in need or more in need than the others. So priests were really working that way. And just like what he said, after the war, sometimes it was worse. No? It's not only the war that was bad, but it was the after the war effects, which was also very bad. And immediately it was the Catholic Church that responded well to it. The CBCP, Conference of Catholic Bishops of the Philippines, in 1945, the bishops organized themselves, of course, through the initiative of the Holy See. They organized themselves into what they called the Catholic Welfare Organization, the CWO. It was not yet called the CBCP. The CWO was basically the bishops coming together, trying to find the funds, the means to help the Filipino to rise up from the ashes. It was basically that. So it was one of the biggest acts of welfare and charitable works done after the war. So what was the role of the church? To alleviate the sufferings of the people. With all of these things, I think it was very vital and very important.
And Dr. Maximiano, so now we move into Reconstruction. We have many countries and both theaters of war. They have to rebuild their nations. So maybe you can just add on a little bit there what Bishop Juni mentioned. We're now into Reconstruction, post-war Reconstruction, and the role of the church to help the people.
Government was down. Money was minimal. Many hands, many heads, many bodies must be grouped together to work together for this. And there was one partner of the CBCP or CWO, Catholic Welfare Organization. And this partner is what we call the Catholic Relief Service. It was first known as the War Relief Service. And then it was upgraded later on, 1955. What they do was the shipping of and mobilization of several of the resources needed for the reconstruction of those destroyed churches, schools, convents. And it was difficult, and yet people were together. Walis ting-ting, Father, Bishop, the walis ting-ting, being together to rise up from the ashes. But I would like to mention one big problem brewing after the material reconstruction of war. And it has something to do with ideological problem. Masonry was not dead. The masonry of the propaganda movement, of the revolution, was alive, very much alive. And the politicians and the intellectuals were picking it up to go against the government, to go against the Catholic Church. And they were saying, the fate of the glass is to break. The fate of the Catholic Church is to be destroyed. It's so strong. And that is masonry. Another problem was communism. The communism was eating up the orientation of young people during that period, 1950s. These two ideological problems were so important that the first plenary council of the Philippines, 1953, was to address this ideological problem, masonry and communism.
Are you looking for life-changing entertainment? Does what you see on most channels leave you feeling unfulfilled? Well, look no further. Shalom World TV brings the peace and joy of Jesus Christ to you, whether at home or on the go. To start watching, you don't need antennas, cable connections, or a dish. You probably already have what you need if you have a smart TV, such as a Samsung, LG, or Panasonic, or if you have one with an Android, Opera, or Roku TV operating system. These can be found on the latest models of Sony, Toshiba, Vizio, Philips, RCA, Sharp Aquos, TCL, Insignia, Element, Hitachi, Vestal, Skyworth, Changhong, Konka, and Hisense. You can also watch Shalom TV on most IPTV streaming devices, starting with the 4th generation of Apple TV and Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Mi Box, Amino, Humax, or on TiVo Box through the Opera TV store. Are you a gamer or virtual reality enthusiast? We've got you covered. Shalom World is on Xbox One, Razer Forge, Nvidia Shield, and HoloLens. To start watching, all you have to do is go to the App Store, download Shalom World, and start being fulfilled by content that brings you into a deeper relationship with Jesus Christ. For more information on how to watch Shalom World on your TVs and devices, visit us at shalomworld.org/connectedtv. Have a smartphone or tablet? Take Shalom with you wherever you go. Again, by downloading Shalom World from the App Store. If you prefer to watch from your Mac or PC, get the Shalom World desktop app. Or you can always watch from our website, shalomworld.org. And guess what? Shalom World is absolutely free on all of these platforms. Yes, free. There are no download charges and no in-store app purchases required, ever. If you're looking for life-changing entertainment, you found it. It's here, waiting for you on your Shalom World.
So really, in between all of these monumental points of history, there's so much happening in the Philippines. We can't cover it all. But from Reconstruction of the Philippines post-World War II, I want to take us now to the Second Vatican Council. Pope John the 23rd convenes the bishops of the world to Rome. We see the Second Vatican Council, and then we start to see its implementation all throughout the world. So Bishop Juni, start us off here about the role of the church and the implementation of Vatican II and how that helped to just thrive the Catholic faith in the Philippines based on its history and where it came from.
I believe that the implementation of the Vatican II takes on two phases. One, which was the one that a lot of people would sometimes focus too much on, is the liturgical implementation, the changes in liturgy, which in a certain way was, of course, sometimes painful because people are so used to certain things that when you come into a change, people tend to hold on more onto what they are used to rather than to subscribe to changes. But eventually, the changes did happen, liturgically speaking. Now, the harder part of the implementation of the Vatican II was the reformation of certain realities about the church, not only liturgically, but also in the life of the church. Specifically, for example, the life of how the interaction between the clergy and the laity, because in the Vatican II, there is now that clear definition of the difference, but there is also that clear emphasis that we are equal because of that universal call to holiness, that we have our specific vocations, but now that reality is within the context of one single call to holiness. That was an idea that was emphasized by Vatican II, which, because of the nuances, again, of history, that we were so used to seeing bishops on their thrones, as they call it before. In fact, when I was born, the residence of the bishop was called a palace. So bishops were seen as princes. Priests were seen as people who are from a distance. But Vatican II changed that. It implemented certain changes that, of course, there were certain problems with the changes because there were different interpretations of how the change would be implemented. And it caused pain in not only the Philippines, but all over the Catholic Church. But when things were already seen through the eyes of what the ones who implemented it were, things became already more in accordance to the spirit of the Vatican II. And one of the most interesting things that was born in the Philippines because of the Vatican II was the act of mission. The Philippines was at the receiving end of missionary work. But because of the Vatican II implementation, the Philippines, through the Conference of Bishops, it was the time that the Philippines also decided to go on mission. That was the birth of the Mission Society of the Philippines.
So Dr. Maximiano, the Vatican II Council called for a spiritual renewal. Give us your perspective on that and how it was implemented and the effects in the Philippines.
Yeah, the spirituality was not just clerical, but the laity. That is why the apostolate of the laity became so strong. But I would like to mention about three historical events, more or less immediately after Vatican II. One was the formation of NASA, the Caritas Philippines. This became a very, very strong institution that institutionalized what Bishop Judy was saying some time ago, that CBCP was born from the ashes to do the social mission of the church, to continue the social mission of Jesus Christ. And this is in the form of what we call the NASA, the Secretariat for Social Action in the Philippines. Overall, it is also called Caritas Philippines. Number two, I would like to make mention of the 1986 EDSA revolution. This we believe as a miracle. The Philippines is a a Marian. We're talking about spirituality. First and foremost, the Filipino people is a Marian people, a devotee. And everything that goes forward for the common good, for the Filipino development, is attributed to Mary. And one of them happened in 1986. The overthrow of a dictator, the coming in and the reborn of democracy. And it's been copied in many places outside of the Philippines. The Un Pueblo de Maria, the nation that is in love with Mary, has been growing steadfastly. The devotion is scattering all throughout the Philippines among its people. Number 3, I would like to mention that because of that missionary awareness that Bishop Junie was talking about, the OFWs today, overseas Filipino workers, there are about 10 million of them. And they are now bearers of the good news in places outside of the Philippines. And the last one is, this is something unforgettable for me, and this is something beautiful. The 1988 Pastoral Letter about the environment that is issued by the CBCP. Our bishops became so forward-thinking, reading the signs of the times, interpreting it in the light of the gospel, even ahead of what the Vatican was thinking, that as early as 1988, they thought, they discerned that we must have something of a doctrinal nature, a pastoral nature, to tell the world, respect Mother Earth, love Mother Earth. We have only one home, the earth. As a matter of fact, this 1988 beautiful pastoral letter was cited by Pope Francis several times in his encyclical Laudato Si.
Doctor, I just love what you mentioned about the devotion to Mary and the notion how you brought up democracy in the Philippines and how the Philippines sent their very best. I can tell you, myself and my family, we are beneficiaries of those wonderful men and women who you speak of. Well, as you've heard, we've gone through the earlier history and the faithful journey of the Catholic Church in the Philippines. Once again, a very heartfelt thank you to His Excellency Bishop Maralit and Dr. Maximiano. We thank you for sharing your education, your years, your knowledge, your life experiences. And let us hope that perhaps the Catholic school teachers in the Philippines might use this episode as a teaching tool, as you mentioned, Bishop, at the outset. We want you to join us again next week for more of the 500 YOC. Don't forget to download the free Shalom World app to watch the series, get more updates on 500 years of celebrations in the Philippines, and many more amazing shows. I'm JD Maher, mabuhay, and Shalom.
We are blessed, blessed 100-fold, the cross of Jesus Christ in our holy shores.
Is now 500 years, awesome to behold. He has made us all new, we belong to. We are blessed, we are loved, we are called, we are sent. We will teach, we will serve. We are Christ, we are
you searching for fulfillment? Discover true happiness. Stay tuned to Shalom World.